Every few years, Hollywood picks out the actor and or actress that they label as being their next big star, whether they had been in the acting world for a pretty long time or just a few short years. If they like you and you get the thumbs up from both the execs and audiences, then you get pushed up the ladder. But just a few years ago, that would be the position that the actor Henry Cavill was in. He had been in a number of small roles leading up to the bigger ones, of course, with one of them being Albert in The Count of Monte Cristo back in 2002, one of my all-time favorite films. And I was honestly in love with the book too. They just did such a good job with that one in my eyes. But anyway, before I start fangirling over that movie in terms of Henry, it really seemed like he was on an unstoppable journey to the top. Starring in films like Man of Steel as Superman in 2013, to Justice League in 2017, Mission Impossible the year after that, and in the Netflix series The Witcher the year after that. But somewhere down the line, Henry just wasn't the golden boy anymore, and the roles he did get were in movies that were flopping pretty hard. And for some reason, he would just start losing the big successful roles that he had received. So the question is, what the heck happened? And why are people upset with him now for some of the dumbest reasons? Now, Henry, while riding this at the time seemingly unstoppable success wave, was really making his rounds when it came to interviews, and it was nothing that fans, particularly female fans, loved more than hearing about his nerdy side, so to speak. He was really into video games, fantasy books, and the Witcher series was something that he had mentioned being really taken with. And he had even taken it upon himself to reach out to Netflix when he caught wind that they were creating a series and bringing the books to life. They hadn't even started casting yet, and already they knew that he was perfect for the role of Geralt of Rivia. He was clearly very passionate about this, especially being a devoted fan of both the books and the video games. He took this role seriously, and put in a level of work into the development of this character that most actors probably wouldn't have been bothered with. And this ultimately became the reason why many viewers, including myself, really enjoyed watching him play Geralt. Because it's become so frequent over the years for Hollywood writers, producers, and directors to botch movies and shows like this one. The debut season was a massive hit and quickly became one of the most watched shows on Netflix. And the showrunner, Lauren Schmidt-Hissrich, had plans to make this into a 7-season arc. And seeing how the first season was received, it looked very possible. So when Henry was asked in a 2021 interview about being in it for the long haul, he would respond by saying, quote, "Absolutely. As long as we can keep making good stories which honors the author Sapkowski's work. But I think you know how Hollywood likes to take a good thing and destroy it once there's a hefty profit involved. And that's what would end up happening here too. And the writers would start taking some pretty big liberties with the source material and begin deviating pretty heavily from the books starting in season 2. From characters being added that weren't originally there, to also creating plot lines that clearly had very little to do with the original work, and both fans and Henry would take note of this, and he would start speaking up about it, advocating to remain faithful to the books, and in his words, becoming the most annoying guy on set. And let's just say that the writers, producers, and directors were getting pretty annoyed with him for real, and just wanted him to show up and do his job. But Henry kept pushing back, and over time, he just started being labeled as difficult, stubborn, and not collaborative. But this wouldn't sway him, and I'm happy that it didn't. But even with his pushes, audiences would still notice some key differences between the TV series and the books, which would result in the ratings dropping. But it wouldn't be enough for the team to feel worried, so they would just continue doing what they were doing. Season 3 would be announced and people were still excited, but when Henry would make an announcement in October of 2022 that he was leaving the show after the 3rd season, with Liam Hemsworth taking his place in the future seasons, this had turned the fandom on its head, because it was a complete 180 from the excited Henry that we saw after the release of the 1st season. So it would become pretty clear shortly after this announcement why that was the case. And it turns out that he was actually getting ready to quit after season 2 because of constantly getting into it with producers over the direction of the show. He decided to stick things out, but it would get even worse during filming of season 3. And by that point, he was just done. It had started out as a nice passion project for him, but it had ultimately become something that he just couldn't bring himself to be a part of for many understandable reasons. Fans had respected him for just leaving, and the ratings for season 3 were just in the toilet in comparison to the 1st season, and it speaks volumes. Even one of the former show writers came out to say that there were writers on the team that were very open about hating the books and the games, which really was a recipe for disaster, like he said. Because if they didn't at least respect the work that they were creating this show out of, then what are we doing here? Even the author Sapkowski revealed that he had even offered some ideas for the adaptation of his own work. And he would say that the folks over at Netflix didn't listen to him either. So this is when fans would step in and speak up. And the showrunner Lauren Hisrich had decided to make a statement, claiming that she never mocked the books and that she had a great relationship with Mr. Sapkowski. But after reading what he said, I was like, did he know that? So the controversy around The Witcher was definitely getting more attention. But around this time, Henry would make another announcement, stating that he was going to be returning to his Superman role after his surprise cameo in the Black Adam film with The Rock, which, in my opinion, was overall a pretty mid-film. But regardless, people were excited to see Henry come back and potentially be a part of a few more Superman films. But that excitement would quickly be diminished after it was revealed that the new Warner Brothers co-chairman and CEOs of DC Studios, James Gunn and Peter Safran, had plans to reboot the Superman franchise starting with a younger Superman and a focus on his earlier years. So now Henry had walked away from The Witcher and also lost his role as Superman, and things continued to go downhill from there. By mid-December of 2022, there was an anonymous report put out that had begun circulating accusing Henry of being toxic while filming The Witcher, with the accusations being that he was impossible for women to work with, deeply addicted to video games, and was often distracted, late, and obsessive. It was also said that he was making up lines and wanted complete control of the storylines, and eventually this narrative started to ruin Henry's reputation. Then people started bringing up what he had said back in 2018 when he expressed his feelings towards the Me Too movement. And I understood where he was coming from with his comments, but the timing was kind of terrible because people were pretty sensitive around this point in time because the Me Too movement had pretty much been at its peak. And I do think that there were good intentions with the movement because women should feel safe and also have the space to speak about their experiences and pursue legal action if they want to. But I also think that the movement, once it reached a certain size and level of influence, it kind of became a monster. And it started exposing women for straight up lying on men as well, and they'd face little to no legal punishment, and simultaneously also making it a whole lot harder for actual victims to be believed. So this had pretty much created a new environment when it came to dating where men are indeed petrified of approaching women and being around them in certain instances. But Henry would quickly receive backlash for his comments and he would just as swiftly apologize and the issue would be dropped. But now that it was years later, in 2022, and this was compounded with the Boys Club Witcher story, now people were questioning Henry's character. And you know, once people start questioning your character, things should start magically getting dredged back up, and this is what would happen to Henry. Eventually, it would resurface that Henry had dated a 19-year-old young woman back in 2015 that he had met at a London nightclub while she was a university student. And the age gap was pretty hefty, considering Henry was 32 at the time. But Henry would defend the relationship, but it did only last a few months. However, it was long enough to raise some eyebrows. It definitely left his fans split, with some thinking that it wasn't really as serious as people were making it out to be, and others feeling as though it was super inappropriate. Now, all of this sparked from that article that was written making accusations at Henry, but if you take a look back at it, it was never actually backed by anything. No real evidence or anything substantial. There could have been real frustrations there, but there wasn't anything to substantiate it. And those who have worked with him that have spoken out have all pretty much had positive things to say about Henry being very polite and professional. Recently, there was even a story that came out from the actress Millie Bobby Brown where she was talking about how Henry had strict boundaries when they were working on the films Enola Holmes and the sequel Enola Holmes 2 a little while later. He was very much so bent on having professional relationships with the people he worked with on these projects of his. And what's crazy is that people still came after him for this, calling him rude. It's like, what do you want from the man? But all of this really had me thinking of how this all really came from his Witcher departure, and how the team over at Netflix was now on the defense because Henry had left the series, and they were now being looked at as the people that were ruining Sapkowski's work and legacy. Apparently on set, they claimed Henry was warned for his so-called behavior by HR. But again, there hadn't been much evidence of this happening in terms of any paper trail. But they claimed that they had actually fired him but allowed him to say publicly that he was stepping away from the show. They refer to his unwillingness to just follow through with the lines that he was given to act out as being inconvenient. But in all fairness, he was told in the beginning that he was going to be playing a character that remained close to the books and the games. But after the first season, that turned out to be untrue. Then because he happened to be fighting back on that and the people that he was working with just so happened to be mostly women, it's very interesting and seems rather convenient that he all of a sudden turns into a misogynist because of his unwillingness to just play along with the obvious changes being made from what was promised. Now, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have mattered if it was men or women in that position. He probably would have given them the same headache when filming because they were doing the opposite of what they said they were going to do. Liam Hemsworth did come in to star in the 4th season of the show, and I watched it. It was alright, but it was definitely lacking. And I think a lot of other people thought so too because that season would receive the lowest ratings in the series' history. Now, Henry Cavill would still go on acting and appearing in films after this whole mess, with some hits and misses. But it was pretty clear that some folks still carry some lingering feelings towards him. However, I am happy he stuck to his convictions, but The Witcher for me is definitely on its last leg. And I'm not really sure how much longer it would be able to be kept on life support if they stay on this path like all the other money-hungry producers out there running things into the ground because of the obsession with trying to put out shows that they believe are going to be interesting to the audience, instead of just listening to the audience when they tell you to just stick to the dang source material. They just want to see that. Stop trying to write and put out what you think they're gonna like and just listen. But anyways, what are your thoughts on this one? You can let me know down in the comments. I'll catch you all in the next one.